Hello, my name is Nathan Bird, founder of Acquicon, coming to Salt Lake City on March 21st, 2025. And I'm seated here with Kristin Elinkowski, business broker with over 7 years' experience and her master's in positive psychology from the University of Pennsylvania. She has been a part of over 100 transactions, specializing in mid market business transactions. And we are here honored to have her a part of the Acquicon conference coming up, as well as the Acquisition IQ podcast. So share with us a little bit more about why you're in business for yourself, but also why M&A.
Thanks for having me. First of all, I'm
Hmm.
happy to be here with you, and I'm really excited about the conference
Me
coming
too.
up. I started as a business owner myself, and in e-commerce is where I started, and I really liked that and wanted to expand. And at that point, I was looking for another business to acquire. So that was my first introduction to business brokerage, was looking for myself for another e-commerce business. And through that process, I decided to become a business broker instead. And it's been a really interesting, rewarding, fun, sometimes frustrating
Hmm.
industry to be in. But I really enjoy learning about different businesses, what makes them successful, what makes them fail,
Hmm.
different entrepreneurs, how they approach things, helping buyers buy their dream business, helping sellers sell their business for what they hope to. So there's a lot of joy in it, and it's been really rewarding. So it's a really interesting, fun business to be in. And it's the best part of the people, like any industry. It's really fun to work with the business owners and the business buyers. So.
What I've noticed, there's a few different paths you can create wealth in your life, as well as different paths within business. And I have seen different business owners go from, hey, I'm going to start this business and then I'm going to get maybe a loan, or I'm going to invest my own money in this business and start it from ground floor. Then you have another option, which is businesses through acquisition. And it seemed like that was the path that you wanted to choose based on your experience. So you were excited about the startup, but then you're like, wait a second, there may be another option. So speak to that. Speak to that moment where, hey, I'm going to start engaging in the knowledge that I need to be able to acquire this business. So what was the first thing that you did?
Well, I think you're right. There's a difference between complete startup, starting your own business and starting from scratch, and acquiring a business. And I would say, there's advantages to both, but the advantage of buying an existing business, and this is what my realization was too, is that when you buy a business from someone else, lots of times they've gone through a lot of the blood, sweat, and tears to get to where they are.
Hmm.
And then you can walk in and just learn from them and gain from their knowledge. The really nice thing about buying a business as compared to starting one is that you're walking into cash flow typically. You are going to get trained by somebody who started this business from the ground floor. So they're going to teach you. And then you also have better financing options, honestly. The SBA is much more willing to give money to an existing business. So when you walk in and buy an existing business, then you have financing options. You're walking into cash flow. You're going to have an expert train you on that business. So for most people, unless you're just this startup entrepreneur, um, acquiring a business that's already existing really has a lot of advantages for the average business buyer.
Yeah, and I think that as a founder and a startup branding person myself, you get so excited about the start, right? And I was just on a podcast the other day with another gentleman, and you almost forget what it's going to take in order to get all the way to the end.
Yeah.
You get so excited about the start, and then you're like, well, now let's just, then we have to learn through all these other things. So this is interesting. I was watching a show the other day, and they said, well, a house is built on, houses built or communities are built on other communities. And then, you go back to the houses that is built on somebody's like cave house, right? So everything is just built on top of other people's work, you
Hmm.
know? So it's almost the same with businesses. It's just a matter of you being really precise with your efforts and understanding on how to scale or systematize certain things. So, what are you seeing within businesses that you are helping to transact? Number one, what is the failures that you're seeing that these businesses have through their transaction or through their business, and then also the successes that they're having. So, as far as their systems of duplication.
Well, everyone goes about things differently, and sometimes, so as a new person takes over a business, sometimes they change the technology, sometimes they change how things are done. There's an understanding in the industry. I don't know if anyone's actually researched it, so I don't know how true this is. But when someone takes over an existing business, the old adage in the industry is a third will do worse, a third will do the same, and a third will do better. So I don't know if anyone's actually researched that and
Hmm.
how true that is, but that's kind of the belief. And we see that, sometimes someone takes over a business and it doesn't do as well. Sometimes they take it over and it just keeps running smoothly as it was. And sometimes we see someone take over a business and just really blow it up and grow it. So a lot of it has to do with the entrepreneur, their skill set, their motivation, how much they want to grow it. Lots of times, what we see with this mid market business owner is they kind of reach a point of burnout. And it's been so hard. That startup phase is so much work, as you and I both know, we've been parts of startups, that sometimes they get to a point where they're just kind of burned out. And so they don't really want to grow it anymore. It's either doing well enough that they're fine with where it's at, or they're just tired. They usually, when you ask them, they usually know how they could grow it. They just haven't been willing to do it, or they're just kind of out of steam, honestly. So sometimes a new business owner will come in with a lot more energy, new ideas, new determination, and they're able to grow an existing business that had kind of been stagnant for a while. And they're able to just really infuse some life into it and grow it to a place that it hadn't been before.
Let's go to your strength here with the understanding of psychology. And I want to ask you the question of why and how does somebody prep themselves from a mental standpoint to make a decision that could impact their life? So maybe that drives back into now the psychology of change, and then so it's a little bit further outside of just business acquisitions or a business sale. But now let's get into the mind of the individual who is about to make that decision.
Well, I think there's definitely people who enjoy safety and security, and that's why they stay at their job. That's why they don't take risks on. Not everybody is cut out for, or has interest in, or wants to be a business owner.
Hmm.
The type of person who does usually is a little bit more of a risk taker. They're willing to learn. You kind of have to have. There's a term in positive psychology called a growth mindset. So it's knowing that even if you're going through something challenging, that you're growing and you find joy in that growth. So I think business ownership is definitely one of those growth moments where you're taking a risk. Whether you're starting your own business or acquiring one, you're taking a financial risk. There's some opportunity cost of what you're not doing. And so you have to have this growth mindset that you're ready to grow, you're
Hmm.
ready to learn new things. Business ownership takes a lot of pivoting, takes a lot of flexibility, it takes a lot of mental fortitude, because it's not easy. And if you're the type of person that just wants to stay at their job and get a paycheck every 2 weeks, that's great. The world is made up of all different kinds of people.
Hmm.
But an entrepreneur has to know that they're taking some risk and they're okay with that, and that they're going to have to grow and learn and change and pivot and be flexible and put in the time and the effort and the energy necessary to make it successful. So I would say, from a psychology standpoint, that you have to have that growth mindset to want to own your own business.
We talked about autonomy and how you can create that for yourself, and I think it's important that we understand the roadblocks that are going to come before they actually come from a mental standpoint. So, can you share maybe some of the roadblocks that you've seen that have kept people from making those decisions that they need to make? As far as acquiring a company or with an exit that has failed to actually finish the transaction from a mental standpoint. What has kept that person or that scenario from actually happening based on maybe a limiting belief, or can you share a little bit more about that?
Sometimes sellers get, It's an interesting dynamic. Sometimes when somebody wants something we have, we put more value on it than we had before that. So sometimes when you see a seller get ready to sell their business and then they see that a lot of people want their business, it kind of makes them think, why am I selling?
Mm,
Why am I selling? Maybe I should keep this. Maybe I can grow it. So there, you definitely see some hesitation sometimes on some sellers' parts. Some are just ready to go and they know that, but some hesitate. Some buyers get through the process and then decide not to. There's too much risk, or they just aren't sure that it's going to work out how they hoped. And honestly, there's never a clear cut 100% fail proof plan on any business.
hmm
It does require some risk taking, and not everybody has the mental fortitude for
Yeah,
that.
to go through
And
that.
that's life is full of risks. We all have to take some certain amount of risks, but business ownership is definitely one of those where you have to be willing and able to take the risk and know that you're going to have to what you're going to have to go through to get it to grow. But at the same time, back to your point about autonomy, I do think for employees, the happiest employees we know are the ones who feel like they have the most control over their job, over
hmm
their day, over their own creativity. And so I think that's what draws a lot of people to business ownership is that autonomy. When you can be autonomous, when you can make your own decisions, when you feel like you are at the helm of your own ship, that's powerful to
hmm
people. Feeling like there's so much in our lives that we're not in control of. But when you feel like you're in control of your destiny as far as business and wealth
hmm
growth and all of those things, then that creates this. When we know that we're doing some work on agency and autonomy in the positive psychology world right now, that the more agency a person has, the better their well being. And that research is new, but it comes back to this point of, having your own, having control,
hmm
being able to have your own agency when it comes to decisions and how to grow your business and how to grow your wealth. So
Yeah.
I think that comes into play a lot. Why business ownership is attractive to so many people.
Yeah. Well, we're seeing my question, I guess we'll go down the road now of the harsh reality of the seller not actually getting the value that they are perceiving their business is worth, because I've seen multiple times now in due diligence with different companies that there is a harsh reality where it's like your business is not worth what you think it is. So how do you have that conversation? But then on the flip side, how and what would you say to the seller, to be able to actually create the value that they perceive it being worth so then they can sell it for top dollar? So let's go through that.
I think first of all, it is a problem that we see a lot in the business brokerage world. As a broker, most sellers think their business is worth more than it is.
hmm
And I think a lot of that is because as the entrepreneur, how much work you put into it, how much time you put into it, how much knowledge you have. And so, from a personal standpoint, you put a lot of value on that as the business owner. But when someone's coming in as a buyer, then you have to realize that they're basically working for free, whatever that multiple of cash flow is. So 2 or 3 years is what they're paying. If they're paying, let's say it's a 3 times multiple. Let's say for numbers' sake, it's making 100,000 a year, and they're buying it for 300,000 a year. They're basically working for free without a salary for 3 years. And so, from a buyer's standpoint, businesses are typically not worth as much as a seller thinks they are. And that's our struggle as brokers and in this industry. A lot of sellers think their businesses are worth more than they are, and buyers usually think they're worth less than they are. So that's always the issue. I would say as a seller to be realistic about what your business is worth, and you have to look at it from the buyer's point of view, that they're coming in and buying a business that they really are not going to get paid for 2 or 3 years, depending on what multiple they're buying it for. But one way, when sellers call me and ask me, how do I make my business more valuable? In the mid market, it's really cash flow. So that net profit, or we call it a lot of different EBITDA or
hmm
seller's discretionary earnings, that number becomes really king in this industry. And what that means is whatever that number is, Depending on the industry, depending on how large you are, it's a multiple of that number that you sell your business for. That's how we value businesses. That's how appraisers will value your business, how banks will value your business. It's a multiple of that cash flow. And so, as a business owner, some things you can do is increase revenue or cut expenses. That's really it. Increase revenue or cut expenses. You want that net profit number to be as high as possible when you're getting ready for a sell.
More sellers need this information. Like, I feel so that's why we're doing Acquicon. You
Right.
know, we need more sellers and business owners to understand this because again, why would you work a business your entire life and then try to sell it for nothing or like for pennies on what you put into it, you
Mhm.
know? And that I believe again, that's why, we're so focused on helping provide education through podcasts like this and through experiences just because we want you as the business owner to put your efforts into something that is going to create exponential value and you're able to do it from a strategic standpoint. And, you know, you on the other side, you have so much insight and knowledge to be able to share with those business owners. And I'm again, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you. I'm excited
Our
to be here.
the conference is going to be again March 21st coming up, 2025. But we're here with Kristin, and she's in the mid market. So share with us a little bit more about why would I sell and when do I sell?
That is a great question, and I get asked that a lot. Sometimes, unfortunately, what happens is usually when things are going really well, sellers aren't as motivated to sell. They want to sell when things start going a little bit south, a little bit worse. Numbers start dropping, or they
Mhm.
start seeing trends, or they know of something in the industry. And I understand that. It's hard to sell a growing business. You can see that you're growing, your revenue's growing, your profit's growing. It's not a great time to sell. At the same time, that's the best time for a buyer to buy a business. So you have to kind of weigh. What I usually say to sellers is if it's at a price you're happy with and you're tired, that kind of comes down to it. For whatever reason, you're ready to retire, or you want to spend more time with your family, or there's another pursuit you want to do, another business you want to start, or another business you want to take over. There's a lot of reasons why people sell their businesses.
Mhm.
Sometimes it's what I said before, like you kind of get burned out.
Yeah.
Starting a business is a lot of work. And sometimes they get to a point where it finally becomes profitable and it's doing well, and they just say, I'm tired.
Yeah.
I'm just kind of tired. When you're tired, that's a good time to sell. When you feel burned out, that's a good time to sell. When your business is growing, that's a great time to sell because you're showing growth and that makes it more attractive for a buyer. And unfortunately, a lot of people don't think about selling till it starts going the other direction. So I think for every person, it's their personal situation. It's their own, what's happening in their own life. That's when they have to decide what's the best time for them to sell. But what you don't want to have happen and is if you get to a point of burnout and you're not putting in the time, effort, and energy that your business needs to succeed, then what you're going to do is sometimes, unfortunately, we see this, a business that's worth quite a bit of money, but then the owner just kind of backs away and doesn't have a great management team in place or doesn't have something to kind of, that's helping them build the business and grow the business. And when you're not in build and growth mode, you start to kind of slip and then their business becomes worth less. So it's a hard one. Always sell your business when it's worth the most, but that's the hardest time to sell it because
Yeah.
it's
It's like a
doing well.
heyday. Yeah.
Yeah, because it's doing well and it's growing. But that's the best time to sell a business because a buyer comes in and sees that you're on a growth pattern. And that's what every buyer wants to see. This business is growing and I can even grow it more.
In order to go through the transaction, there's got to be people that help the small business owner. And my question to you is who are the team members that are most needed through the transaction? And have you seen people try to cut corners and how does that decrease the overall valuation or what the buyer can get for their company? So team and then also that second question.
Yes. Sometimes people don't wanna pay a broker, and I understand that. We do have a commission fee. When we sell your business, we take a percentage of that sale. However, we do this all the time, so most people have only sold one business or they've never sold a business, so a lot of business owners have never gone through that process. And while they're experts in what they do, brokers are experts in what we do, so I would say use a broker. Always use a broker. You are going to have to pay a commission fee, but the research is pretty clear on the fact that when you use a broker, you tend to get more money for your business. So I would make the argument for brokers that we make up more in our value than we do what you're going to have to pay us
Mhm.
because we do this all the time. We help with the whole marketing. We know where to market it. We know how to find buyers. We know how to vet buyers. We know how to help you through the negotiations process, the closing process, all of that. So I would say a broker is a valuable person to have on your side. Also, it's always good to have an accountant because as you want your books as clean as possible when you go into and when you start that process of selling your business, you want to have clean books. You want to I would always use an accountant anyway for a business,
Mhm.
any business I was running, but to have your books clean and to have an accountant that understands your business. And then as you sell, there's some things that your accountant can tell you, to kind of offset taxes and some ways to where to allocate the funds and those
Mhm.
kinds of things. So you definitely want an accountant and you're going to want a lawyer. Either your own lawyer or an escrow lawyer, but you need to have a lawyer be involved in the transaction. And if you skip the broker, at least have an accountant and a lawyer. You're going to want both of them for a transaction just so, this is probably the largest thing you'll sell in your life as a seller. Make sure you have professionals who are helping you through that process because for most people, like I said, it's the only time they'll do it. Lots of people will start a business and work in it 20, 30, 40 years and then want to sell it. They're only going to sell one business. You get professionals. Yeah, you're going to have to pay for them,
Mhm.
but it's worth it. You're going to, it's going to be a more seamless process. And then you have professionals helping you along the way.
Yeah, we don't want to make hasteful decisions on something you spent so much time creating,
Right.
really. Well, that's wise insight from you. Thank you for sharing that.
You're welcome.
To all the viewers out there, make sure if you guys haven't already to go to aquicon.live. We will have more information that continues to roll out as the conference gets closer, March 21st, 2025. Kristen is going to be one of our panel discussion leaders. So her insight and wisdom is invaluable for the small business owner who needs to learn all of what she's spoken about today, plus more. So, thank you so much, Kristen, for joining us today on Acquisition IQ as a part of the Acquicon conference coming soon.
Thank you. I enjoyed being here and looking forward to the conference.